For years, Simon Cowell was more than a television judge. He was an institution. His sharp tongue, unwavering confidence, and unapologetic honesty made him one of the most recognizable figures in global entertainment. From American Idol to The X Factor and Britain's Got Talent, Simon built a reputation as the ultimate gatekeeper, someone whose approval could launch careers and whose criticism could end them just as quickly. Audiences tuned in, expecting blunt truths, raised eyebrows, and remarks that cut through sentimentality. He seemed unshakable, immune to emotion, and completely comfortable being disliked if it meant being honest. That persona worked because it felt authentic. Simon never pretended to be gentle or warm, and he never asked for sympathy. He thrived on control, clarity, and results. For decades, that version of Simon Cowell defined him in the public eye, making his later transformation all the more striking. Subtle changes that fans could not ignore. Over time, long-time viewers began sensing something different about Simon Cowell. The sarcasm softened, the critiques became more measured, and his once intimidating presence took on a quieter tone. He still smiled, but it no longer carried the same sharp edge. Fans noticed that he chose his words more carefully, especially when children stepped onto the stage. Moments that once would have been met with skepticism now seemed to genuinely move him. One particularly emotional performance on America's Got Talent, centered on family and parenthood, visibly affected Simon in a way audiences were not used to seeing. At first, many assumed it was age or exhaustion after decades of relentless work. Yet the change felt deeper than fatigue. Simon began appearing in fewer interviews, skipped red carpets, and deflected personal questions. The shift was gradual but undeniable, suggesting an internal recalibration rather than a temporary slowdown. Fatherhood and a private transformation. Much of this change appeared to coincide with Simon becoming a father later in life. In February 2014, while the world focused on celebrity headlines, Simon experienced a deeply personal moment in a New York hospital room when his son, Eric, was born. He later admitted that fatherhood transformed him in ways he never anticipated. For a man who once claimed he never wanted children, the connection was immediate and grounding. He spoke openly about how holding his son reshaped his priorities and softened his worldview. Eric was named after Simon's own father, a quiet tribute that revealed how deeply family history mattered to him. Unlike most aspects of Simon's life, fatherhood was handled with care and restraint. He did not turn it into a public narrative. Instead, it became something he protected, signaling a shift from living for visibility to valuing presence, choosing protection over publicity. Despite his global fame, Simon made a deliberate decision to keep his son largely out of the spotlight. There were no reality show appearances, no constant social media updates, and no attempts to fold Eric into the entertainment brand. When Eric did appear publicly, it was brief and understated, often at charitable events or backstage moments that felt natural rather than staged. Simon appeared gentler in those moments, attentive and proud, but also cautious. Over time, these glimpses became rarer, and fans noticed the absence. In an era where celebrities share nearly everything, Simon's restraint stood out. Speculation inevitably followed, but Simon never engaged with it. He did not deny, confirm, or explain. Instead, he maintained silence, choosing privacy over clarity. That choice itself spoke volumes, suggesting that whatever mattered most to him no longer needed public validation. Understanding Simon before fame. To understand this quieter Simon Cowell, it helps to look back at who he was before success. Born in London in 1959, Simon grew up in a household connected to the entertainment industry, where expectations were high and appearances mattered. School was not an easy fit for him. He struggled with structure, clashed with authority, and eventually left formal education behind. These early experiences shaped his skepticism towards systems and rules that did not align with his instincts. He drifted through various jobs before finding his footing in the music industry, learning from the ground up how deals were made and talent was shaped. Failure arrived early and publicly when his first record label collapsed, forcing him to move back in with his parents. Instead of breaking him, that setback taught Simon control, emotional restraint, and patience, traits that would define his later success. Building success through discipline and detachment, Simon Cowell's rise in the music business was fueled by observation rather than emotion. After early setbacks, he rebuilt his career with focus and strategic clarity, learning how to recognize commercial potential and audience appeal. He became known for separating personal feelings from professional judgment, a skill that later defined his television persona. Even during moments of failure, Simon avoided public displays of vulnerability. He believed in managing his narrative quietly and moving forward without explanation. This emotional distance helped him survive in a competitive industry, but also created the image of a man untouched by sentiment. That image followed him for decades, making his later openness about fatherhood all the more surprising. When Simon spoke about Eric changing his life, it contrasted sharply with the man who once dismissed emotional attachment as a distraction from success. Stepping back and redefining legacy. As Simon entered his 60s, his priorities became increasingly clear. After a serious back injury in 2020 forced him to slow down, he experienced something unfamiliar: stillness. Work paused, schedules cleared, and for the first time in years, he had uninterrupted time at home. That period marked a turning point. Simon reduced his commitments, became more selective with projects, and began structuring his life around family rather than television cycles. In interviews, he spoke less about ratings and more about balance. When asked what legacy mattered most to him, he did not mention fame or success. Instead, he said he wanted his son to be proud of him. It was a simple statement, but it revealed everything about how his internal compass had shifted. Silence, speculation, and the power of restraint. As Simon continued stepping back, public curiosity grew louder. Online discussions attempted to explain his absence, often reading meaning into his silence. Yet Simon never fueled speculation. He did not offer explanations or corrections, choosing instead to maintain boundaries. In a culture that demands constant access, his restraint felt almost radical. What stood out was not what he said, but how he carried himself. Whenever he spoke about Eric, his tone was careful, warm, and protective. There was no performative vulnerability, only quiet intention. Simon's silence was not avoidance, it was choice. By refusing to turn his private life into public narrative, he reinforced a new truth about himself. He was no longer interested in being endlessly visible. He was interested in being present where it mattered most. A quiet evolution, not a disappearance. Simon Cowell did not vanish, nor did he abandon the industry he helped shape. Instead, he evolved. The man who once thrived on dominance and disruption learned to value stillness and connection. Fame no longer defined him. Fatherhood did. His reduced presence was not an exit, but a recalibration, a conscious decision to choose home over headlines. To some, the change seemed mysterious. To others, it felt inevitable. Simon himself never framed it as a sacrifice. He framed it as clarity. After decades of building careers for others, he turned his attention inward, toward the role that mattered most to him. In doing so, Simon Cowell revealed something unexpected. Even the most unyielding figures can change, not because they are forced to, but because love quietly rewrites their priorities.